Good evening, and welcome to Alex Troy's talk about his new book. And it's a long title. So it's called The Academy of Smoke and Mirrors, a boarding school on the brink. Now, Alex Troy taught European history, the history of the Holocaust, and the introduction to investing at the Bicultural Hebrew Academy High School in Stamford, Connecticut. The Academy of Smiles and Mirrors, a boarding school on the brink, is his first novel. It is inspired by his career and as an educator and also his business work. Before becoming head of school, Alex worked as a lawyer and an investor for 30 years. He is a board member of Ever Scholar and the Jewish Book Council, who provides us with our authors. Yeah. In addition, right, he's happy about that. In addition to his MA, he holds a PhD from Harvard, a JB from Harvard Law School, a BA from Yale University, and now he has moved to Southern Florida, where he lives with his wife, Dale, in a different location than he lived previously in Connecticut. I hope everyone has questions. Otherwise, my colleague Claire will ask some of them, and I'll ask some of them. And now, Alex, take it away, please.
Well, Reva and Claire, thank you both very much. And thank you to the Temple B'nai Shalom and the JCC for giving me this opportunity. I'm very grateful for it. So you heard from my introduction. I'm a teacher. That was my last and most enjoyable career. So I'm like a teacher. I'm going to tell you exactly what I'm going to do tonight. So I'll give you an outline. First, I'm going to give you a summary of the plot of the Academy of Smoke and Mirrors. Then I'm going to tell you two backstories. You know, Jewish people love stories. So I'm going to tell you two backstories that explain how this book came to be and how I came to write this book. And I wrote it with a friend. I want to credit him too. So I'll get to that. And then I'm going to talk about the writing process. After those two backstories, I'll talk a little bit about the writing process, and then I'll stop with, I'm going to read you a little bit from the book. So here it goes. First, the outline book. So the book, let me say this. I think anyone who hasn't read the book and is thinking about it, the obvious question is, well, why should I? And here's the case I want to make to you why I think this is a book you should read, and it's also the reason I wanted to write the book. The book is centered, it takes place at a Jewish boarding school in the Deep South. Now, that is, I'd say, unique, not just unusual, but unique. You don't find Jewish boarding schools really anywhere, but especially, why would you think, why would one expect to find one in the Deep South? And the other reason I say to read the book, besides this very unusual setting, is the book is a humorous story. It's designed to make you laugh and smile. And who couldn't use a laugh or a smile now? You know, when Reva was talking about the people coming to talk about the war and all the other news that drags us all down, I think we all need a respite from that occasionally. And my book will give you that. Okay, so into the plot. The story opens with the protagonist. His name is Jeff Taylor. I'm going to let you guess who Jeff Taylor is modeled after, but I'll give some hints. He went to Yale and he worked in the hedge fund business, and he decided to become an educator. So I don't know where I got this idea, but so that's Jeff Taylor. And he is at a school called the Hampton Acres Hebrew Academy, also affectionately known as HaHa. So that's giving you some sense of what kind of place HaHa is. It's a wild, eccentric, crazy place. So what is HaHa? It is a Jewish boarding school created by a fiction, and this is all fictional, by the way. We're talking about this is all fictional, inspired by some real places, which I'll get into, but the story itself is fictional. Haha is a Jewish boarding school in rural Georgia near a small city called Bradleyville, a fictional city called Bradleyville. It has 145 students. They're all Jewish. They come from all over the world. They come from Mexico to Malaysia City, many of the countries that were former Soviet Union countries, Israel, obviously, some Western European countries, Brazil, Central America, the largest proportion, all over the United States, so all from all over America. And the largest proportion of foreign students are from Mexico City, which you may or may not know, but Mexico City has a very large, vibrant Jewish population. So when the novel opens, Jeff Taylor, who is the head of school, is busy writing his resignation letter, and because he wants out. And the reason he wants out is the school has a lot of problems, but the most serious problem is it has a tremendous mortgage, a very heavy debt on it. And Jeff, who's a financial guy, has come to the conclusion after working there for several years, there's no way they're ever going to be able to refinance that or get out of the financial mess it's in. So he wants to leave before the bankruptcy process starts. He anticipates that's going to be awful. And as he's writing his letter, his assistant interrupts him and says, Jeff, we just got a bomb threat delivered in wrap. So that's how the novel opens. And that is the engine that drives the story forward. Every time Jeff thinks he is in a position to resign and he takes out his draft letter and he starts working on it, he's interrupted by the crisis du jour. And there always is a crisis because that is the nature of this school. They have a lot of kids who are eccentric. Some are brilliant. Many of them are very active. They have all kinds of dreams about doing Tikkun Olam. So there's always something going on at the school. I should mention that I said it's in a rural area. There's a nearby neighbor is a gigantic pig farm, and that will play some role in the story. You know, there's that famous observation about writing. The great Russian playwright, novelist Chekhov said, you don't put a gun in the first act of a play unless it's going to go off in the third act. Well, my humble version is you don't put a pig farm in the opening pages of your comic novel about a Jewish boarding school if it isn't going to play some important role by the end of the novel. But that's all I'll say. So that's pretty much a summary. I would just add that although Jeff is the head of school, he's an ex-Wall Street guy. He's left Greenwich, Connecticut. He has some personal reasons where he wanted to start his life over, and that's why he's there. He does have a boss. Even though he's the head of school, he has a boss. His boss is a woman named Samantha Kleinman. She goes by the name of Sammy. And Sammy is the daughter of the school's founder. He's no longer alive, but he's the one who made all the money. And he's the one who had the vision of creating, the goal was to create a Jewish Lawrenceville or a Jewish Exeter or a Jewish Andover. And so part of Jeff's challenge is not just managing all the students and managing the faculty, which is mainly Jewish too. He also has to handle Sammy Kleinman, who's a very demanding boss. That is the summary of the book. And I understand there's a Q&A at the end, but you know, I like to proceed informally. So if anyone has any questions along the way, just go ahead and talk and interrupt, and I'll be happy to try to answer them. So let me now tell you, I think an obvious question is, where does this come from? Why did you write this book, and where did you get these ideas? You know, so I want to tell you what we would call in Torah learning, these would be called midrashim. So a midrash is sort of the backstory to a Torah story, and I'm going to give you two of them. The plural of a midrash is midrashim. I'm going to give you two backstories. One about a real school that I did work at that is the inspiration for Haha, and the other is about myself, why I came to be head of that real school and how it led to the writing of this novel. So Midrash number one, this is about a real Jewish boarding school. The school was located in Greensboro, North Carolina. It had a very, very wealthy philanthropist who had a vision, a real vision. He wanted to create a Jewish Exeter, a Jewish Andover. And his goal was that his school would, after a time, produce a steady stream of young men and women, Jewish men and women, who would go on to become leaders in their communities, both in the United States and around the world. He wanted his school to do the same thing for the Jewish world and the world at large, really, that Andover, Exeter, those famous boarding schools of the Northeast did and probably still do for the United States, create an elite, essentially. So that was his goal. And now you might think it's a little strange to put a school like that in Greensboro, North Carolina. But I mentioned I worked on Wall Street. There's an old joke, not that funny, but there's an old joke. What's the golden rule on Wall Street? He who has the gold makes the rules. So this gentleman was extremely wealthy and made his money in a very arcane manner. He traded what's called airline reinsurance. I don't want to get into the details of it, but I mention it because it'll become relevant in a minute. Airplane reinsurance is just, think of it essentially as insuring some amount of risk for an aircraft. And the founder of this school, who wanted to create the Jewish Andover Exeter, he figured out some foolproof way of trading airline reinsurance contracts, and used the money to open up a school in Greensboro. And he opened up the school on September 10th, 2001. Now that date may resonate for some reason, because you know what happened the next day. And what happened, unfortunately, to the founder of the school was 3 of the 4 planes used in the 9/11 attacks, he was insuring parts of those planes, which meant millions and millions of dollars, ultimately probably billions of dollars of damages. And the school never really recovered as a result of that tremendous financial blow. But the school persisted, and it was still around in 2016. And so now I'll switch. That was Midrash number 1. That school, which was called the American Hebrew Academy, that school was the inspiration for the fictional school in my novel. So the second Midrash, which I'll tell you now, answers the question. So, why did I end up working as head of that school? What was I doing there? And so just a little on my background. I grew up, my dad was a professor of economics. His father, my grandfather, was a yeshiva bacher. He was a student of Talmud and Torah at a very famous yeshiva in Lithuania called Slobodka. And my grandfather left Slobodka at an early age, luckily for all of us, and came to the United States and started a new life as an immigrant. And so he was not really able to pursue life as a scholar. But I think it's in our genes, because it's what we like to do. And so my dad became an academic, an economist. And as a young boy growing up, I thought he had the best job in the world by far. But when it came time for me to go to college and then to think about what I was going to do, my father very much strongly discouraged me from pursuing an academic career or an intellectual career or a writing career. And he said, it's very hard to make a living doing these things, and it's going to get harder. And I recommend you go in another direction. And like an obedient Jewish son, I did. And I have to say, I'm very grateful to my late father for that guidance. He was right. But I also would say at a certain point, when I had the opportunity for a variety of reasons, I decided I was going to try another career. This was after the end of a long career, both as a lawyer and an investor. I went back to school at 55 years old, got a master's degree. It's called St. John's College. Where you read the great books. It's in Annapolis, Maryland. And after that, I went looking for a job teaching. And that's how I got introduced to the American Hebrew Academy. That's how I became head of school there. And my wife and I went down to visit the school on a recruiting trip. And we fell in love with the place. we were there on a spring weekend, and Friday night there was a beautiful North Carolina moon hanging like right over that school. And every building at that school was made from Jerusalem stone. That beautiful white stone you see when you go visit the Kotel. And that stone glows in the moonlight. It becomes coppery in the sunlight. So we fell in love with the place and we signed up right away and we said, yes, we're going to do this. So we left Greenwich, Connecticut. We moved to Greensboro, North Carolina, and I went to work at that school. And I was there a very brief time and I realized that however difficult it was going to be to help this school right itself financially, fix itself financially, there was tremendous opportunity here for a writer to write about either the school in a memoir or write a work of fiction, which was the route I chose, inspired by the school. And I'm going to give you a little taste of that when I do the reading. But the essence of it is, and again, this is my argument. I think this novel is unique. I know that's a very strong word. That's a very strong claim to make, but I don't think there's another novel out there about a Jewish boarding school in the Deep South, because there was only one. It was, and that was the one I worked at. And sadly, it did eventually succumb to its financial challenges, and the school no longer exists. There was a similar school that lasted longer, was a little more successful in England, called Carmel Academy. I actually have some friends who graduated from it, but that's gone too now. So if there is another novel about a Jewish boarding school, I don't know about it. But what I would tell you is it makes for a very interesting environment in which to tell a story. So much so that I consider the school itself a character, and I think it's the most interesting character. Okay, so I've said that, and I've given you the two midrashim. So if there aren't any questions, what I'd like to do is just read you a little from the book, and this will give you some sense of what the environment of a Jewish boarding school is like. So if that's agreeable to everyone.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. I will do the reading now. So I'm going to read from chapter 2. So a little bit more than one page. I'm going to skip a little at the end to give you kind of like a wrap up of this, but this is essentially the narrator. He's giving us Jeff Taylor's thoughts, and as you know, the school that Jeff works at is called HaHa. Okay, so I'm reading now from the novel. The Beast, capital B, the Beast was Jeff's metaphor for HaHa. The Beast had a short temper and a short memory, a small brain and huge energy. Usually it would be lying half asleep, fretful, on guard, nostrils twitching, one eye open, one ear erect. Then, red alert, something would happen to make it jump up, hyper awake, and bolt, and slam against the furthest extent of its chain. Engaged but confused, it would lunge back and forth against its chain, roaring. Then the something, whatever had aroused it, would vanish. Then the beast, which was basically friendly, which never meant and rarely did any harm, would stop, chase its own tail in a nervous circle 3 times, and collapse back into half sleep. And if the beast could talk, it would say that it couldn't remember what the something had ever been. But of course, the beast had people who could and did talk for it. The beast had 145 students, Jewish kids from all over the country and the world, Mexico to Malaysia. The beast had 60 teachers, almost all of them Jewish, and a staff of 50, a third of them Jewish. The beast had many Jewish mothers, led by the irrepressible Rhoda Friedlander, who were ferocious advocates for their children. In the mind of its teachers, staff, students, and their mothers, Ha Ha was a special, precious place, a place about which they cared very, very much. So much that when the least thing happened, the thing would instantly rile everyone, would possess the school, would generate a tizzy of texts, emails, phone calls, and intense in-person conversations. What do you think? What do we do? Then somebody, usually Jeff, would do something, take care of the mishigas, or as often as not, there was nothing to do. The thing that triggered the tizzy would resolve itself. In either case, the beast returned to its half sleep. And Jeff thought to himself, I am the beast's whisperer. So that's a sample of the book. And it gives you, a bit of an idea of what might go into trying to be the head of an institution like this.
Wonderful.
So yeah, I hand it over to you guys now. So it's
When you wrote it, were you thinking of what age to as your reader?
I think of adults as my readers, not young adults. You'll see there are a lot of references in the book to both cultural things and kind of Torah references that I think are more on the wavelength of adults. So,
And well, talking about trying to get it published. So it's your first novel. What was it like trying to get it published?
very, very challenging. So let me first, in case someone, I want to always be very transparent. This is a self-published novel. Okay. I did try to publish it. I went out to like 79 or 80 different agencies in New York. Now, I will say, when I did that, it was just during the COVID period. So, who knows what was really going on at these places. But I get very few responses. Most people just ignore you. Did get some people say, this is interesting, this is unusual, but it's really not what we're looking for now. And I think it is a little out of step that way. A Jewish boarding school in this environment. But so I ended up self-publishing it, and that is a challenge in itself. I could talk at length about that, but I would, the quick summary is when you do that, you become your own everything, right? I mean, I hired an editor, but you have to manage your editor. I hired an artist to do the cover, and I love the cover, but you have to learn all about that so you can manage the artist. And I think the biggest challenge by far of self-publishing is you have to market it yourself. You have to somehow get the word out. And so.
I know when I was at graduate school, I wrote a book and I only sent it to one place, though I did have an agent, and they said there are three types of books. We definitely will publish, we won't publish, and we'll publish if the market is good. Well, the market isn't good, so no. And I never wrote again for a lot of people. I just write myself. So I know I give you credit for reaching out and learning about how to publish, because I never really took that up. Anyone have any questions? Yes.
I do. The headmaster of the school is planning to resign. Why does he find it very difficult to do so?
Yes, great question. And so I guess the short answer is Jeff is a mensch. And now I'm talking about the character, so I'm not patting myself on the back. It's not talking about me. It's talking about the character. And as a mensch, this is the type of school, just by the nature of the student body and the faculty, there's always some issue going on, right? The beast is always being awoken from its sleep, and it's all worked up, and then it goes back to sleep. The crisis passes. And Jeff feels, that he cannot leave the school. So for instance, when the novel opens, Jeff is writing his resignation letter and there's a bomb threat. And he feels, if I resign now, right after a bomb threat, that's going to look like I'm scared, I want to get out. And that's a terrible signal to send. So there's always something like that. But I do want to add one thing, because this is funny. This is a joke that is not in the book that my co-author, his name is Jim Parry, I should mention him. Jim and I realized this was totally unintentional and coincidental, but Jeff, the dynamic of the novel, which is Jeff wants to resign, can't because something stands in his way. And so he waits and he tries again, can't, right? That parallels almost exactly the movie, and this is funny, right? Because this is about a Jewish boarding school. It parallels the movie It's a Wonderful Life with Jimmy Stewart. If you know the movie, and almost everyone knows the movie, you know, the Jimmy Stewart character's name is George Bailey. George Bailey wants nothing more than to get out of that savings and loan, that family-owned business, and go see the world. And every time he's about to do that, he's foiled, frustrated by some crisis. And who's a bigger mensch than Jimmy Stewart, right? And Jimmy Stewart can't leave that job until he's fixed everything. So that it's very similar to the Jeff Taylor Hampton Acres Hebrew Academy situation. Honest to goodness, that was unintentional. We didn't crib that, but there it is. You know, it's like that's why he can't leave.
So I have another question.
Yeah.
As Haha students come from all over the world, from Malaysia, you said, and to Mexico City, a lot of them. So does that create some sort of like a tension within the characters? Like the students have differences. They're all Jewish, but probably they practice the religion.
Right. Yeah. So in the novel, most of the tension is between Jeff on the one hand and the various constituencies. So he does have some tension with the students. He has tension with the faculty he's managing. Most of his tension is with his boss, Sammy Kleinman. Now, you asked about the students having tension with one another. And yes, there is that. There are some characters, there are some students who are, you know, I'm trying to think of the polite way of saying, you know, less popular, maybe socially a little more awkward. They form a group, and so there's, you know, there's a sense of tension between them and the more well-adjusted students, and sometimes Jeff has to try to mediate that. But the international element, I wouldn't say contributes that much tension in the novel. In real life, there were issues. You know, at the school that was the inspiration, I would tell you that what you learn is, so we had a very large population in Mexico City. Those kids they come out of a very different culture than the United States. So they have some very different ideas, say, about tolerance for certain kinds of differences are absent in that Mexican culture and present in the American culture. That can lead to real tension, but that doesn't put, you know, this is a humorous novel, so we don't get into these serious issues of that nature. But thank you for that question.
And you have another question, Claire?
Yes, actually,
Okay.
So if you were able to sponsor the movie, and you
if only, please. Yes, go ahead. I'm sorry. If I were able to sponsor the movie.
and you know, maybe you're able to finance it all, you know, yourself.
Yeah.
I know it's a maybe faraway dream, but who would you want Jeff acted?
Who should play Jeff Taylor? That's a great question. You know, you're asking someone who's a little dated in terms of his. I'll tell you the first name that popped into my mind, and I guess it's crazy because he's not Jewish. He doesn't look Jewish, although he's a very good looking guy. So Tom Cruise, the eternally youthful Tom Cruise. Now, would he be convincing as a head of school? I don't know. Let me think. I turn to the audience. Does anyone have any ideas for who would be a good male lead? I'm
Adam Driver.
There you go. I think that's a very good solution. There you go. Yeah. By the way, I've gotten certain compliments, which I appreciate as a writer. You appreciate anything you can get, but I have had some people tell me that the novel is very visual and therefore would make a good movie. So I know I'm talking to a California audience. If there is anyone who, is connected to that world, feel free to call me at any time.
Okay. Okay.
Alan, I have a question. This is Don.
Yeah.
The fact that your school is set in the South, it's based loosely on a school also in the South. Do you deal at all with, I hate to say stereotypes, but just kind of cultural issues of the South? Because you said usually these schools are located in the Northeast. I'm just kind of curious how much the setting impacts your novel.
Yeah. It plays a role. As I said, the school, when the novel opens, the school receives a bomb threat, and there's immediately concern on the part of a number of people at the school, teachers, students, that there are, again, I don't want to get into the stereotypes, but there are certain types of people living in the rural South who don't want to have Jews for neighbors, and that they're behind this. And I should add, by the way, I was giving you guys reasons to want to read the book, the humor, the unique setting. There is a little mystery story. I would never market this as a mystery, but there is a little mystery as to who is calling in these bomb threats. And I think there's a nice little twist resolution that you'll get some pleasure out of at the end. And so you'll see if we use those Ku Klux Klan types or not as the culprits.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for the question.
I have one.
Yes, Elizabeth.
Do you think that there is a large market for Jewish education and also Jewish readers about Jewish education?
Right. Great question. So let me start with the second question. Is there a large readership for this? I mean, when you write a novel, and this took, as I said, this took 5 years, and there were 2 of us, so it's really 10 man years, right? When you do something like this, there's really 2 things that sustain you. One is you have this need, and it's very hard to explain why. You have this need to express yourself. You feel like you've experienced something, seen something, had an experience that should be recorded and shared. I would say that's very Jewish, that's like Zachor, you shall remember, right? You have to share that. So, but I think you're also sustained by the hope that maybe, who knows, I mean, maybe this will be the sleeper no one expects, that'll, that thousands of people will read. Now that's not happening yet, but I believe in the book. I mean, I think it's a very, I think it's a very well-written book. I mean, I'm sorry, I know that's patting myself on the back, but let me just defend myself by quoting from Pirkei Avot, right? If I am not for myself, who will be? So I do think, while I don't think there are people dying to read about a Jewish boarding school, I don't think people wake up and say, gee, I wish I could find a novel about a Jewish boarding school. I do think there's always interest in a well-written story with a lot of characters, especially if it can make you laugh. So that's my hope.
A question.
Yes.
Did you go to a Jewish day school growing up? And what was your religious affiliation? Were you conservative, Reform, Orthodox?
Yeah, great. Both excellent questions. So the first is no, I did not go to a Jewish day school. And I would tell you, when I told the background story of how I wound up running the real school, I left something out that was important, which is at around 40 years old, I started to get very interested in Judaism again after having lost interest from my bar mitzvah 13 to 40, so 27 years. But I started to get more and more interested and became a regular student of Torah. And in terms of my affiliation, I was raised conservative. When my wife and I, when we married, we would always join Reform temples. Now I tend to go to Chabad because when I walk into a Chabad, the melodies they sing are very similar to the ones that I grew up with in my conservative synagogue. So I guess the real answer is it's like a smorgasbord. When I go on Friday nights with my wife, we go Reform. Saturdays when I'm by myself, I go Chabad.
There are multiple Chabad day schools for boys in the country. Have you visited any of them?
I have not. I have not.
There's one down in Alabama that our local Chabad boy goes to.
My family, my father's family comes from Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, and there's a Chabad yeshiva there for kids. So they look for these. I think they look for these inexpensive areas to set up their operations for the kids to train, to educate the kids. But yeah, sorry, were there more questions?
Anyhow, I want to thank everyone for joining us, and I hope you'll buy the book, read it, and tell your friends about it. Alex, thank you so much.
Thank you. I had a lovely time. Enjoyed talking to all of you. Thank you very much.
And everyone be well, and thank you very much, Alex.
Take care. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.